Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sinead O'Donovan, and I have with me Ryan Young, who is a system integrator and a managed service provider for a number of our customers, and is also one of our Microsoft customers. So I want to start out today with kind of the customer voice, which is really important, and that we listen to all the time in the things that we design. And the first thing we're hearing from customers is that they're all being disrupted in one shape or other, and that they have a need to create and they have to use technology in different ways. It's not just about their IT functions, but it's really about how do they create that next level of service in order for them to be able to do more in their business. And so that's first and foremost. And so they're looking at how do I do that, and how do I use my few resources in the most effective way possible. And so they start with this mindset of how do I use SaaS in more interesting ways? How do I myself create SaaS services for what I build? And then the second thing they tell us is, I have a huge investment in infrastructure already. How do I optimize for that? And then how do I leverage the cloud when it's right? And so it's all about how do I be cloud first? When I have a need, how do I then use the cloud for it? The third thing they're looking for is they want to go faster. And so they want more agility. And it's not just agility in terms of, I want to create these new things more quickly, but they're also wanting more flexibility. How do I portability? How do I move it from on-premise to the cloud, or from the cloud to the edge, or from one cloud to another? So agility is in many different forms. And lastly, security. Every customer is really looking at this whole new model of security around this sort of zero trust architecture. So I'm going to start and just tell you just a little bit about Azure networking. We have one of the world's largest global networks. We operate in 54 regions worldwide. Everything on our network is ours. Every router, every switch is programmed with our programming model. We've abstracted it. It's all software defined. And we extend the network out to over 50 countries with 160 network edges where traffic enters our network. Our goal is to be, right now, within 30 milliseconds of every large concentration of users in the world. And that's a really important goal, and we're wanting to get that even down further. So you'll see us continue to expand the network reach. Both ExpressRoute we have 200 plus partners who help get traffic to our network with dedicated links, and similarly, we have a growing ecosystem of SD-WAN providers that we also integrate with. And so with that, I'm going to just turn over to Ryan to give us a little bit of, he's been working with a lot of customers as they embrace this SD-WAN journey. I'd like for him to tell what his customers have been doing on SD-WAN and what their experience has been.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you. Hi, everyone. So one of the things that we've been seeing a lot with our customers is the pace and the adoption of SD-WAN growing. And there's a couple different flavors of SD-WAN that we've been seeing. One is they're in a data center-centric hub and spoke model, where all their traffic is going from their branch sites into a regional data center and then out to the internet. And the other one we've been seeing is customers being very early adopters and doing a lot of point-to-point IPsec and moving traffic over public internet. And one of the things that we've been working with our customers to kind of adjust within their SD-WAN fabric is breaking out internet at the branch edge to access SaaS apps as all of us go to a cloud-first approach. Really, how do you approach those SaaS apps and Office 365, and how do you start to distribute the workloads through your public cloud to have faster access for your enterprise applications?
Great. So in Azure networking, I want to just sort of tell you a little bit more about the richness of both the services that we offer. It's really not like your on-premise network. It's familiar concepts, but everything is API driven. And you can operate, whether it's from the CLI or PowerShell or ARM, whatever programming language, it's very focused, very flexible. Everything is around, it's all about the developer and being able to spin up and down resources by leveraging these APIs. The second thing is the richness of the services themselves. They are not, they are abstracting the network concepts. And so you have, everything is virtualized. All the functions of the network are virtualized. They're auto-scalable. They're highly available. They're as a service, if you will. The third thing I would say is that we've sort of got them kind of a set of services that enable you to kind of connect and form the fabric in the cloud. And then there's a set of services that enable you then to connect on-premise into the network itself. Then we have a set of services around network security that allow you then to protect it. And then we've set of services that enable you then to how do you optimally have your application delivered when it's ran in the cloud. And sometimes it might be that the app is in one region, but you have a global audience. So we have both, content delivery, network services, or Azure Front Door. So we provide the services for you to be able to make your application work. And then finally, monitoring. What does that mean in the cloud? And we have a set of services to support that. So this is a slide a few deep dive slides, and I'm going to have Ryan speak to in more detail. The first thing I want to maybe highlight is that we're really seeing both a network transformation and almost a redesign of the application pattern. The first thing we're sort of seeing is that the app to the user, we want that to be very internet-centric. So we're looking at these apps, we know the users are mobile, we know that they can be coming from anywhere, and so it's very important that we embrace this sort of internet connectivity model for a user-to-application workflow. The second thing is we're gone from those days of having sort of 3 internet edges for your organization where you funnel all the traffic to these central choke points. We're really at more of a distributed connectivity model. And we're really advocating that that is the best for a cloud first, to support your cloud first goal and to support your SaaS adoption. And then the third thing we're seeing is that the application front end to the back end needs to be all done over private connectivity. It just offers another layer of your defense in depth story. Why have it on the internet when it doesn't need to be? And so we're seeing very much people embracing, even though they're using platform as a service, they're really wanting to connect with privately. And the last thing is really looking at that app delivery model. It needs to work with the edge. You need to have this flexible model where how is the app designed such that if it needs low latency, how do you do that? If you're an autonomous driving system, you don't want it taking huge round trips even up to a central region. You've got to make real-time decisions. Latency matters. A lot of these latency-sensitive experience need the compute close to where the user is. And so the importance of having that flexible model all up. So with that, I want to just turn a little bit and have Ryan tell me a little bit more of how is he seeing with his customers the connectivity model changing, and how important is the internet connectivity model. And it also feeds into sort of why we're seeing the rise of SD-WAN.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the areas that we've seen a lot of growth in terms of conversations with customers about their connectivity from the branch, connectivity from the campus, connectivity from the data center has been around how do we get that lowest latency? So an example I can give you that I actually just had a conversation with a customer today. They have SD-WAN connectivity across the country, and they have services within their Azure environment that they're currently backhauling through their express route. So one of the things we're working with them to do is actually to extend Microsoft Virtual WAN out to their edge sites so that we're able to provide the fastest path to get to that enterprise application that is low latency and doesn't need to actually traverse into a data center to get to their cloud data center.
I see. And can you speak to, Ryan, some of the benefits? I think you had some examples of customers saw benefits for SharePoint. You also saw customers with benefits when they actually leveraged our global network for their routing. And I think you had one where your own routing changed dynamically to prefer us.
That was actually us.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had a conversation with a customer where they were looking to migrate from their legacy SharePoint environment to Office 365, but didn't want to saturate their enterprise connectivity back to their data centers with all of the SharePoint synchronization out to the branch site. So one of the things we worked with them on is to do a breakout at each branch site to leverage connecting to Office 365 from each branch site, so that they're able to get that low latency SharePoint connectivity without saturating the high cost enterprise connection. In terms of my experience with virtual WAN, I was telling a story earlier about how when we originally set up our environment, we had our enterprise resources that were up in Azure that we access, and we were doing the full route exchange. But we also enabled our branch-to-branch routing. But we suppressed it with a lot of route suppression, just so it didn't take over as we moved through the phases. And one of the interesting things that I was telling Sinead about is our SD-WAN vendor, through its own algorithms of running application latency and QoS checks, about 8 hours into us being fully up on our production virtual WAN environment, it actually flipped our route tables over to Azure Virtual WAN as the primary fabric for our entire infrastructure, because the SD-WAN provider had established that the cleaner, faster path was actually going through the Azure Virtual WAN rather than our site-to-site VPNs, and all 7 sites are actually within 30 miles of each other, which is pretty phenomenal that even going through a cloud provider and back down was rated to be a faster vehicle.
Great. So another new model, and you'll start to see, we're going to release a pretty comprehensive white paper from Microsoft here on what is Microsoft's take on a zero trust architecture for a customer. And I want to just show you this sort of model because it's quite complex, but it starts with sort of 3 fundamental principles. The first principle on zero trust is all around explicitly set access decisions using a variety of signals. And it's very, very important that it's an explicit access decision. So that's the very first principle. The second principle is all around least privilege access and continuously verify that the access is appropriate. So it's not just a one-time thing that you set it and 20 minutes later when the auth certificate's being renewed, you want to be constantly monitoring that session to decide if you should take away access based on the signals that you see. And then the third principle is all around this concept that a breach is possible. And if a breach occurs, you want to minimize lateral movement. You want to really make sure that you're able to detect that it has occurred and that you're able to fix it quickly. And so it really funnels into how do you microsegment the environment? How do you deploy the workloads in such a way that you can really ensure that you can both detect that something's happened and that you don't have that lateral movement happen. So there's sort of some of the principles. The other thing that's foundational in sort of looking at the model is we sort of bring it down into 6 kind of core pillars that you really need to have a thoughtful model on how you apply it. The first one is around your user and your use of identity. And so we're really recommending, obviously, that every user should have an identity, but every app should also have an identity. And that you really focus on having these identity controls for everything. The second one is around the device itself, and maybe there's different policies depending on whether it's a corporate provided device or it's a bring your own device. Then the third pillar is around the data. And here it's very much, it's one of your core assets. How do you classify it, label it, encrypt it? How do you ensure that it's appropriately managed? And then the third one is really around the applications themselves, whether they be the SaaS apps that you're using or your own line of business apps. And then how do you have that adaptive access for all user access for these applications? And then another key one is the workloads themselves. How are you deploying and managing them for a zero trust model? And then lastly, the networks itself. And what are you doing around segmentation? And how are you embracing this multiple perimeters and these even micro perimeters, which are all now possible. Were pretty impossible in on-premise days, but you can now do in the code because everything is ran as code. So with that, Ryan, I wanted to maybe ask you about your customer experience. What are you hearing from customers around zero trust? And where are you finding customers in that journey? And if you can share any kind of best practices that you're seeing from customers.
Sure. So I'd say since about 2013, we've been having conversations with customers about zero trust and least privilege, and really how they're going to be rolling it out across their environment. And we've really worked with our customers to get their enterprise infrastructure ready for it, working with them to figure out how to apply security without security then becoming an obstruction to their workforce, and really helping them identify the who, what, where, when, why portion of the access into their environment. What we're starting to see now is as we train and educate our customers on infrastructure as code and moving workloads to the cloud and scalably deploying, we're starting to see a lot more acceleration into that zero trust, least privilege model, because our customers are, where they're not replatforming, they're moving applications up and looking at, we're starting to take a look at what's the application talking to? Why is it talking to that? And building application-based least privilege models, not just user-based least privilege models.
Great. So one of the things in Azure is how do you then use our own network security services to achieve zero trust? And so we've sort of got a layered model. One thing, it starts with our software-defined networking functions that are in Azure. And this is everything from our constructive or VNet, where you deploy your resources into, to the network security groups, where you can lock down per resource or per VNet. Also your private link, how do you connect PaaS services and access them over a private connection. So we've set up SDN layer. Then the other thing that we provide in the platform is the idea of these cloud-native, rich networking services. So Azure Firewall, it's auto-scalable, works across subscription, across VNets, it's highly available. Again, it can be deployed in 1 minute by code. The rules can be dynamically created. We're seeing a whole new model of how it's used in the cloud. And then similarly, we have a web application firewall for protecting the web workloads, and then DDoS protection. And so these are all kind of combined with a sort of a defense in depth approach, and then partners play a critical role. And I think you already spoke to this, Ryan. Why is the infrastructure as code so important, especially as you're looking at having embracing that zero trust model?
Sure. So there's a couple areas of that. The first area of it is we try to work with our customers so that nothing that goes into the final production state is actually malleable by human hands. Humans are great, but we do make mistakes. And when you're going from the dev to test to production, we really want our customers to start to embrace the fact that going from the test to production is really just changing a variable and having everything automatically spin up. So you're getting a like-for-like configuration. That's incredibly important. One of the other areas that we've seen our customers really embracing infrastructure as code is working with the security team so they understand how they can get the same visibility and security they have in the environment that they built on premise up in the cloud. And really, at the end of the day, I mean, an example of where this worked out perfectly, we went through with our customer, set up the security perimeter, set up all the segmentation, showed them how the code sets worked, and they essentially said, this is great, gave the code blocks to their developer team and said, moving forward, this is how you're going to deploy applications into the environment, make sure that your tags are set up properly, and we'll manage the firewall policy at the edge. But what that did was that freed up the development team to start spinning and iterating a lot quicker because they didn't have to have a constant back and forth stream about, well, can we do this, can we do that? Now they just are clicking a button and that infrastructure is building behind them.
Great. And then finally, just want to kind of bring it all together. So this is a model where how do all the services, how are they all put together in a way? What is a good sort of reference architecture, if you will, for in the cloud? And so when we start with it, we look at the northbound as traffic comes in. We look at, well, you'll use a set of services at the network edge, and that would be things like our front door, our CDN, our WAF at the edge. And then you bring the traffic into sort of what we consider a shared service environment, and this is where you would typically have your network security services. And then you have all all these VNets which you've set up, which are really sort of different, it could be different organization groups, different application patterns, and you've created this segmentation. And you then funnel the traffic. And similarly, when you connect on-premise, you use some of our services like Virtual WAN, which is sort of our distributed connectivity model into the cloud, or ExpressRoute, depending on if you're connecting a data center versus a branch office. And so this is sort of a good sort of ideal reference architecture for a customer. What are you seeing at customers? Do they look like this, or are they different?
So this is our ideal infrastructure. Gotcha. This is the way we like to configure it and deploy it with, multiple layers and multiple portions of the segmentation. The other model that we often see is people jumping in early without taking a step to think about where it's going to go from here, and building a very flat environment that doesn't scale. So often in those scenarios, we have to help kind of re-platform them into a shared services model to give them the security and the scalability that they need.
Great. Well, thank you, Ryan. And so anyway, we're here. You can find some of our team is here at the booth. Please come and talk to them. They help customers every day on how to deploy networking solutions. We do have a POC session that's also happening tomorrow. Please join that. It's about our Azure Front Door service. I think you'll like that. And then also I'm participating in the hybrid town hall tomorrow. And here's our networking blog if you want to learn more. Ignite is coming up in about a month, and there should be lots of new things, announcements around Azure networking then. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.